Right, hello everybody. I've done a quick rinse out, had some water, so we'll crack on with another Canadian from Canada. So we've done Canadian Club, so let's do another Canadian Mist. So this particular one was one that I bought myself for the challenge when I was in Orlando earlier on this year from Total Wine and More. So this is a 10cl bottle that I got, which was a massive $1.49. Now for a 75cl bottle, you're looking at about $9, or you could pick up one of these mothers that is a 1.75 litre plastic jug of the stuff, which I think it was Liquor Barn, was selling it for a not insignificant $15.99. So as you can see, we're definitely getting to the top end of Canadian whiskies. So this particular one, you would think is a sort of a reaction to Canadian Club, and it sort of is, but it's Canadian Club was set up Canadian Club officially became Canadian Club in 1890. Canadian Mist, the distillery, was set up in 1967 by Brown-Forman, who are the company that own one of the biggest American wines and spirits company. They own Jack Daniel's, Woodford Reserve, Early Times, Old Forester. They've just purchased the Scotch whisky distilleries Benriach, Glenglassaugh and Glendronach. So they are a big company, and they built this distillery in a place called Collingwood, which is similar to Canadian Club or Windsor, is also in Ontario, and this is where it is. Now, Collingwood is also available, just give me a minute because I forgot to bring this over, a few years ago, I think we're looking at about 5 years ago, Canadian Mist is made at the Collingwood distillery. There was a rumour going around that because it was owned by Brown-Forman, they were actually using some stock from Early Times, which is the Kentucky bourbon. But Canadian Mist apparently is all made in the distillery in Collingwood, and all the grains are sourced from Canada as well. Now, about 5 years ago, and it may be a bit longer than this, Brown-Forman actually launched a whisky called Collingwood, which was essentially their kind of premium version. Now, my mum and dad bought me a bottle of this when we were over in America a few years ago, and if you think Hague Club looks like a bottle of perfume, Collingwood, although this is empty, if you can imagine this with brown whiskey inside it, looks like a bottle of aftershave. It really does, even to the point where if you take the lid off, it still looks like a bottle of aftershave. Decent whiskey though. It did actually taste alright. It was very, very easy drinking, but it wasn't that bad at all. But total aftershave bottle. So it's like one of those, you know, when you go to Boots or department stores and things like that, and you've got all the perfume counters, and they've got those massive bottles, like display bottles that look really fancy. Looks like one of them. Really does. So I digress for a change. So Canadian Mist, set up by Brown-Forman, 1967, essentially to try and take advantage of the demand for Canadian whisky. Canadian Club, absolutely huge in the mid-50s, big demand for Canadian whisky. Scotch was kind of falling away a little bit at this time. Scotch was popular, but we were starting to get on the downturn of Scotch popularity. American whiskies were sort of on a bit of a wane as well, and Canadian whiskies was really getting quite big, as were Irish. Brown-Forman, we're having some of that. Set up a distillery. It's a blended whiskey, so it's corn, rye and barley. They triple distill this and use brand new white oak barrels to mature it in. Now, it's aged for a minimum of 36 months. Yes, this blended Canadian whiskey is at least 36 months old. I don't think it's much past 36 months, to be honest. I think it's pretty much bang on 3 years and then that's it. So it's the distillery itself is actually by a place called Georgian Bay, which is one of the largest bodies of fresh water in the world. So they've got a very good, clean, pure water source. But Canadian Mist itself is pretty poorly recognised. It's not particularly well regarded. Canadian Club, more because of its history and its provenance, is slightly better regarded. It's still kind of knocked down a little bit by, you know, hard whiskey drinkers, but Canadian Mist even less so than Canadian Club itself. Now they happily market themselves as a mixer. They're not even trying to pretend like Canadian Club that they are any kind of premium product. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a Canadian whiskey. It's relatively cheap. It's used as a mixer. There you go. Have a 1.75 litre milk jug of it for $16. Go knock your socks off. Now it did actually win a gold medal in the San Francisco World Spirit Competition in 2005 and 2009, which is, this is where blind tasting comes in, where it can catch people by surprise if you don't know what it is. And that's why I always say blind tastings are the way to go. If you've got friends together, if you go to a whiskey tasting, if you're hosting a whiskey tasting, do them blind if you can. It makes it so much more interesting. Wine tastings, beer tastings, anything like that, if you can, do them blind, because it gets all those preconceptions out the window. I'll give you an example. It's slight digression, which I know is unlike me, but I did a wine tasting relatively recently with a load of, it was a ladies' night out, and I was hosting the wine tasting to raise some money for our local school. And we did it upstairs in a pub where they sold the wine. We had all the wine donated, and the pub themselves donated bottles of Prosecco. They were selling them on the night beforehand. So it was on Friday night, all these women turn up and they've already got bottles of Prosecco on the table because they're hitting it hard. It was chaos. It was absolute madness. There was me, 2 guys and about 40 women, which sounds absolutely fantastic, but trust me, when they're halfway on the lash already before you've even started, it's very, very difficult to get a word in edgeways. So we get to the second wine, because I started off with 2 fizzes, and the second one was the Prosecco. And there's all these women, and I basically did them all blind, wrapped them up in paper, poured them out, and I gave them 2 sets of tasting notes and just said to them, look, here's 2 sets of tasting notes, tried to make them as different as possible. One was the tasting notes from each wine, normally from their website, and the other one was a wine that was different enough that it should be fairly obvious. So for the Prosecco, because it was fairly dry, I then did tasting notes for a demi-sec champagne. So it was soft and semi-sweet and buttery compared to this dry, crisp, lemony fruit. Table is sat there, yapping away. I eventually get some quiet and I say, right, which one did people think it was? And they were like, oh, it's definitely the champagne. Oh, yeah, it's definitely the champagne. And a couple of women were saying, no, I think it was the champagne. I really didn't like it. I thought it was absolutely awful. Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. I think it's the champagne because it sounds terrible. I said, oh, really? What's that you're drinking, like, by the side of it? Because they had 2 glasses on the go, necking the stuff. What's that you've got there? What is it you're drinking? Oh, it's the Prosecco. Oh, you like that one? Oh, yeah, love it. Yeah, really, really nice. We always have it when I come here. I was like, oh, interesting. Unwrap it. It's the same thing that you're drinking. And it was literally jaw agape, kind of like, what? Eh? What? No. And it was like, yes. But you're trying it with no preconceptions, no idea of, well, this is champagne and I'm not going to like it because I don't drink champagne, that sort of thing. You're just going at it completely blind and looking and tasting and smelling without any knowledge whatsoever, and it really puts the cat amongst the pigeons. So with whiskey tastings as well, if you're doing a whiskey tasting with friends, throw something in there that's quite cheap. Throw something in there that you know some of them don't like, but do them blind, because there is a very, very good chance that they'll be surprised how actually not knowing what it is and trying to take the whiskey itself on its own merits outside of what's on the label or who it's made by or where it's from, that sort of thing really does open a lot of people's minds and surprises them. So now, whereas the Canadian Club was quite spirity, this is actually quite nutty, and I'll be honest, it's got more to it on the nose, and it's better balanced than Canadian Club is. It's slightly cloying and slightly sugary sweet, but there's a definite kind of nuttiness to it. Not particularly complex, and there is a background of like pure white spirit coming through. But it's not quite as sharp as the Canadian Club was. Ooh, now that's kind of burnt the tip of my tongue. Almost hurt, almost painful. There's a really cloying sweetness to it. It's very, very smooth. To the point where there isn't really anything there apart from an initial, I'm going to have to, no, there is a harshness to this actually. There is a harshness at the back of the throat. On the sides there is a even more cloying sweetness than the Canadian Club had. Almost liqueur element, but this harsh roughness overrides everything. On the nose it's not that bad. And on the nose it's actually more pleasant than the Canadian Club, but the palate, nowhere near. There's enough in there to use as a mixer. There's enough of a kick to cut through what you'd be mixing it with in a cocktail. There's enough sweetness in it that it would complement something like Coca-Cola or, you know, sweet fruit drinks or anything like that. Canadian Club drinking it neat, you could get away with. This, no. No, there's too much of a harshness to it. There's a really odd combination of sickly, slightly artificial kids' toffee sweets and this burn of like a pure base spirit, and that is the corn whiskey that's doing that. That's the corn spirit, that's their base spirit that is supposedly odourless and tasteless but just kicks you and is quite rough. It's not stripping the back of my throat, but it's not too far off. So it's a combination, it's an unbalanced combination of two not particularly pleasant flavours. Yeah, no, that, not good. Not a good whiskey at all. It's not quite as artificial as some of the blends that you can get that are cheap, that have got a lot of colouring added to it, but it's still a sickly sweet, almost kind of MSG post-Chinese takeaway type feel now in the inside of the mouth. Like I really need to rinse it out, and that's not the type of after effect that you want when you're drinking a whiskey. Not great. I have quite a lot of this left, as you can see, so I will be happy to auction this off, and all profits going towards charity. I would hope to get at least 100 quid for this high quality spirit, maybe 100 pence. But yes, I will be saving this potentially for my event at the final weekend, and giving this to all my best donators. Interesting. Hey, look, that's part of the challenge, is, you know, trying these things, and trying things that you wouldn't ordinarily try. And there's going to be some bad stuff in there. It's not a great whiskey, to be honest. And 2 whiskies ago was just an amazing Tullibardine. That's the point of the challenge, is to see where those highs and lows are. So we've still got some more Canadians to go. I can't remember how many there are. I think there's about 10, maybe. So I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.